Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of a 5-week webinar on coronavirus, bereavement, and grief in the BME community. Today, we are diving deeper into our conversation with coping with the bereavement of a loved one with coronavirus. A report co-authored by the experts from the University of Manchester states that the Black people are at almost twice the risk of death from COVID-19 than white people, with men of Pakistani and Bangladeshi heritage 1.8 times more likely, and women from the same backgrounds 1.6 times at greater risk. This disparity is partly due to long-standing socioeconomic inequalities and the increased likelihood of underlying health conditions, as well as the overrepresentation of Black, Asian, and minority ethnic people in careers such as health and social care, professions more likely to be exposed to the virus. We grieve after any sort of loss in our lives, but it is most powerful when someone we love dies. Everyone feels grief differently, and there is no right or wrong way to react. However, there are healthy and there are unhealthy ways to cope or handle grief, which our guest speakers will be throwing more light on today. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this edition. I am A. Simbeng, and I am the host today. Today, we are going to look into the how to cope with grief as a result of the bereavement of a loved one due to coronavirus. So, our guest speakers today, they are full of knowledge, they are full of information, and they are going to thrill us today with what they have to share with us today. We all know that bereavement, grief, that some of those emotional or sensitive topics or even taboo topics which people usually say, but bereavement, death, they are all inevitable, and these are situations which each and every one of us will go through someday. I just want to send out hugs and kisses and prayers and everything positive to anyone who has lost a loved one during this period of coronavirus as a result of coronavirus. We all know that people have died during this period, not really because of coronavirus, but our topic of today, we are concentrating more on the bereavement of our loved ones as a result of coronavirus. So let's bring in our guest speakers today and give them the opportunity to introduce themselves. You are all welcome to our studios today, and I'll pass over to Festus to start for your introduction. Welcome once more, and thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Clarice, for having me here today. And hello to everyone out there. My name is Festus Mfo. I work with the NHS as an IT trainer and test analyst. And also, apart from that, I'm also a coach, a mentor, and one who likes to encourage and build people up. And so I believe in the world that we live in, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic going on, we need more positivity. We need more encouragement. We need people to build and surround us that will help us navigate through these hard edges that we're going through at the moment. So I'm happy to be here today and happy to share my experience and exposure vis-a-vis grief and bereavement.
Thank you so much and welcome once more. Thank you, Jay. Over to you, and you are welcome to our studios today.
Is that Jay?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I had an interruption. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Clarice, for having me on the show. I am LJ. I'm a resilience coach and also a registered social worker with extensive experience working internationally. That includes Finland and the UK. I have about 13 or 15 years professional experience working as a social services coordinator with unaccompanied minor asylum seekers, and also I've worked with the unit resettlement manager working with Finnish Immigration Service in Finland. So I currently work as a case manager with the youth offending team in the southern part of England in one of the county councils there, where I work with aged young people aged 10 to 17 who have become involved in the criminal youth justice system. So I have passion for supporting young people and their families to ensure that they thrive and they flourish in by making a conscious, deliberate, determined effort. So I believe that the battle is in the mind. So this is an interesting session for me to take part in. And one of my favorite quotes is, when life knocks you down, you better land on your back, because if you can look up, you can get up.
Thank you so much. That's a powerful one right there. Thank you. And over to you, Eposi. You're welcome to Art Studios today.
I'm happy to be here. Well, thank you so much for extending an invitation for me to be a part of this conversation. I'm Eposi, I'm Eposi Ziton. I'm the host of Spending Quality Time. Well, I'm also a nurse. I'm a mom, a wife, and I've done a lot in my community to empower grassroots women, grassroots people, and I talk about all hot topics in our community. I also try to educate people on how to live a healthy and happy life.
Thank you so much, Mom. Thank you. We appreciate you for coming here today. Hi, Tessy. You are welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Clarice, for having me here today. Yeah, it's a privilege. I'm so glad to be here with you guys. I live in the United Kingdom at the moment. I'm from Cameroon, Kumba, to be more precise. And I'm a mom of 3. I'm married. I am a nurse by background, registered nurse by background in the United Kingdom. I've worked with the NHS for a while, and I'm the CEO of Benedon Healthcare. Benedon Healthcare is a healthcare service that provides supported living accommodation with Birmingham City Council. We support people with mental health problems, people with learning difficulties, autistic people from the age of 18 years and above. And we also support dementia patients as well, and older adults in their own homes. So we are one of the providers for Birmingham City Council and Warsaw City Council in the West Midlands.
Thank you so much. That's quite interesting. And I'll have to come to you after the show so we talk more about that, especially when it comes to autism.
Yeah.
So I just want to thank you guys once more for honoring our invite and for being on our show today. So we throw more light on this topic. And whoever is watching, you are tuned onto it. We are broadcasting live on Facebook and also on YouTube, so you can watch on either of those platforms. Then if you have a question, you put the question down here for our guest speakers, either to answer while the show is ongoing or maybe later on after the show. There's also a support number, a phone number, which if you are struggling, if after listening to the show, some emotions flare up as a result of our discussion today, if you feel you need some support, there's a number which will be put here in the comments box for you to call to be signposted where you can get more help or more support. We all know that grief sometimes comes in waves, and you may not know what will trigger those emotions to come about. So we are mindful of that, and that's why we have a number which is available for you to be able to call if you discover that you are struggling at some point. So we've all done our introductions. Now we dive into our questions. This we talk about grief, we talk about love, we talk about bereavement, and these things, they seem to go hand in hand. I'm just curious. I know we all here know the dictionary definition of grief. What exactly, in your own words, do you understand by grief, and why do you think we do grieve, or why do you think we have to grieve our loved ones when they've passed on? Festus, I'll start with you.
Sorry, why do we? I didn't get that.
Yeah, we just in your own words, why? What is the meaning of grief in your own words, and why do you think we grieve our loved ones when they've passed on?
Well, you see, grief is one of those things that it's normal for people to feel. It's normal for for me, I'll be speaking for myself. Maybe I don't know about others, but it's something that it's normal for you to experience, and something that you feel internally that is as a result of an experience. Maybe like we talk about the loss of a loved one. That is one of the key things that come with grief. And the reason why you feel this way is because one, you're going to miss that person, especially if you had a good relationship with them. Two, you might also feel the same way, even if you had a bad experience with that person, because you might be thinking, well, I wish I had a second chance to make things right. And the person is no longer around. And when you look at the things or issues that caused the conflict that maybe you had, it was like too petty for you to have such differences. So it's one of those things that is so internal that people deal with sometimes without necessarily being on the outside. But like somebody said to me the other day, pain is real, even if nobody knows. And a lot of people carry this along their way. They deal with this, and then they could even carry a smile, but they are grieving. And it's such a difficult thing to go through and to navigate through it, especially with the pandemic that we have. So for me, it's one of those things that people should really, really address and talk about openly to others as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Jay, over to you.
I,
What?
I see I see grief as a process. I see grief as a, the normal process, just as Festus has said, the normal process of reacting to a loss. The loss may be physical loss, such as the death of somebody. This loss may also be a social loss, for instance, divorce. We go through grief, or the loss may be occupational, for instance, the loss of a job. So to me, grief is the normal process of reacting to a loss. And why people grieve?
Okay. Thank you so much for that. Tessy, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah. To me, grief is it's a journey that as human beings we all have to go through that journey as we live on earth. So it's a journey. It's when you lost someone very close to you. It's a natural feeling that you go through. Like people can be very sad. People can be depressed, worried, angry. Grief is the response to loss of a loved one. It can be a family member, it can be a friend, it can be a neighbor, a colleague. So it depends on the relationship that you've got with that person. Like our brother Jay has just explained, people can also grieve because of loss of job, marriage, relationship, sometimes business connections, business contracts. People do grieve when they lost things like that. So it depends on every individual. And there is no right or wrong way of grieving. So people grieve differently. Some people grieve according to their culture. Some people grieve according to the environment where they are. So grief is something that we all go through in life, and we grieve differently.
Thank you so much, Tessy. And over to you, Eposi.
Well, like the other people just said, this is the body's response to loss. And this is the face of grief right here. Looking at me, you can see that I'm not myself. For those who watch my shows, they know that I'm somebody who is very energetic, playful, but I'm grieving right now. My family is grieving right now in Cameroon because I just lost my aunt. And she was buried just like a couple of minutes ago. It's not even up to an hour since she was buried. So when we talk about grief, is how your body responds to sadness, loss. It's a deep sorrow. It's something that you can't even explain. Your body just goes through all those emotions, denial, anger, pain. it gets to a point where you even feel like you don't want to exist no more. And that's why when we talk about grief, we have to start thinking of what are the tools that we need to give those who are grieving so they can better cope with all of the emotions that they're going through. So this is the face of grief right here. This morning when I got up and I saw the pictures of my aunt's death, I was crying. So today is not a good day for me, but I did not want to turn this down because this is therapy for me. Just talking to you all and getting you guys respond to this topic makes me feel like I'm healing. So all I'm going to say is that when people are grieving, they need support, they need help, but we're going to get into that.
Thank you so much. And permit me say, I'm deeply sorry for the loss of your aunt, and may her soul rest in peace. And we are also sending out prayers and special moments to your entire family, and especially to you for being brave enough to take part on our show today, despite all you are going through. To me, that is strength. That is what is required when you are grieving. Yes, because
Amen to that.
you know that in as much as what has happened is so painful, but at the same time, in order to seek healing, in order to seek help, certain things still have to continue. Like some
Exactly.
people say, life has to continue even with or without our loved ones. And thank you so much for being that brave. And I know
Thank you.
talking alone is therapeutic, and people
Exactly.
pointing that out as well. So as you've said, the pain of loss can feel really overwhelming, as you've explained, but there are healthy ways to cope with our grief and learn to heal. So I would like to start with you, Eposi. What are some of the tips that can help a grieving individual cope?
Well, this is the thing. A lot of people don't like to talk about death, but you said already that death is imminent. I mean, we all have to go through that trend.
Mhm.
So when we as a community start talking about things like this, it's very empowering.
Yeah,
It's very helpful because then people can tap into these resources when they're going through such a loss. And
exactly.
I realize that different communities have different support systems out there to help the bereaved. But this is something that we all need to, start talking about because the African culture, we think talking about death is like a taboo. Instead, talking about it is therapy because we come from a culture that a lot of us don't have the money to go pay therapists or counselors. And like you said, people handle it differently. For some people, it might be a day. For some people, it might be a lifetime. So we
Oh,
need to know those resources in our community that are going to help us to better cope with the loss of our loved ones. Talking
okay.
about that, coronavirus is one of those things that, a loss is a loss. We know that. And like I said, my aunt just died, but she didn't die of coronavirus. But for those who have lost as a result of coronavirus, it's even more devastating because dying alone is not a good thing. Just the thought of death is scary, like it is. So to think that you're dying alone with no loved one on your side to give you support is scary. And for your family members who are grieving, it's mind blowing to even think what you're going through. So I sit here today to say that our communities have a lot of resources. The one thing I'm going to talk about first, because I know we have other shows where we're going to talk more on the resources out there.
Resources. Yeah.
But for today, offering self. We should offer self to those who have lost. And
Okay.
that's what I'm going to say for right now.
Okay. That's brilliant. Offer self. That's quite powerful. We are going to come back to that. Over to you, Festus. What do you
Well,
think are some of the tips? Yeah.
like Eposi said, we come from a cultural background where talking about certain issues is somewhat a taboo, and people tend to deal with issues of life that they were meant to be dealt with as a community. We tend to deal with them on our own and become so much of a burden. When we actually looking at some of the cultures, when you go to the halls of education, tell about people like Hofstra telling about some countries are collective in their build-up. We are supposed to be more collective in our structure, but we tend to deal with grief and other issues in a very individualistic tendencies. Now, again, this is where people tend to you have to starting from an individual perspective before we hope for the rest to also join in, we need to try to, because I believe, like most of us, that you need to find your way, even though you're grieving, you need to start your healing internally. You need to start reaching out. You need to, I'm no friends are there. I'm not starting with us first. You need to be one where you could talk to people about what you're dealing with. Talk to people about the pain that you're going through. Because sometimes you meet people and you greet them, and all they tell you is, quote unquote, blessed and highly favored, but maybe they are dealing with grief. But because they have to put on this face that is acceptable in society, they tell a lie, but that's not what they're dealing with. So it becomes an issue. But then I've also learned in life that you don't go as far in life as your dream or your hope or whatever you have. You go as far as your team, the people you surround yourself with. So when you're grieving, you have people that will reach out to you, people that will be there for you, people that will be there, people who understand how life works. And they know that today might be you, tomorrow might be me. If I'm there for you, you're there for me. We do this thing together. So when you reach out to people, you also apply healthy habits like eating the right things, exercising, hanging out, and all of these things. They're all beautiful. But the problem we have now with coronavirus is you cannot be seen, especially in England, with another person who is not of your household. So it becomes difficult when your friends are now living outside of your household. So that's why grieving in this moment of time is extremely difficult. But then friends, loved ones, and families need to get the phone, reach out, Zoom meetings, and might do something to reach out to your friends who are grieving. Like some of us who have experienced this grief and pain, you want to just lash out sometimes because people deal with it differently. And a friend who knows you, the friend who is there for you, would understand what you're going through. I would use this as an example. I lost a very good person, strong person in my life, influential. And my own very good friend, best friend, came in and said this word to me. He said, I want you to cry. I want you to mourn while I'm here because you will never see this person again. It sounded blunt, sounded hard, but he was telling me, I want to be there as your friend while you're mourning because I know you and you know me. I don't want to miss out when you're grieving because people tend to grieve sometimes in the dark when there's no one there. And that's where chaos could take place. When you have friends who can be there for you through thick and thin, you tend to appreciate them. So for us who are not grieving, maybe we need to step up. Maybe we need to also reach out because some people grieve by pulling away. That's why we need to know that if the reason they are pulling away is because we need to reach out and snatch them out before they go down this spiral of depression, anxieties, and so many other mental health that they might be dealing with. So I think it's one thing that we need to look at ourselves in the mirror and think, what can I do to help my friend out or sister or brother out of it?
That's powerful. Thank you so much. So, in the process of grief, we have to reach out to our friends and our loved ones. We have to let them know what we are going through. And I would also like to add that there has to be that awareness, that self-awareness of what you are going through and why you are going through that particular thing. So over to you, Jay.
Um, some of the tips that can help, a grieving individual cope during their moments of grief. The previous speakers have spoken quite, well about it. I may just add, if you like that, identify your network. And also, I want to come from the perspective of building resilience during grief, right? So this is, I think, the grieving moment is a moment where you have an opportunity to tap into your mental reservoir, if you like. You see, there are certain things in all of us that these things have helped us cope in the past. And could this be another opportunity for you to look deep into yourself and focus on your strengths, focus on the things you enjoy doing, focus on the things that bring you joy. And then, just try to concentrate your attention on it. This is just one of the ways of coping with grief.
Okay. Right. Thank you so much for that. Over to you, Tessy.
Yes, I think the others have actually explain very well some of the tips when it comes to grieving. I just have to add, I would like to add that, sometimes when you have a friend who is grieving or who has lost a loved one or who is bereaved, sometimes we as individuals, we find it a little bit difficult to support them because we might be confused as well. Sometimes we don't know what to tell them. Sometimes we don't know what to say. We are so confused. But as the others have said, we should keep in touch. It's very, very important, especially during this time of COVID-19 pandemic, where people are isolating. We live in fear and confusion, worry about the COVID itself. So if somebody is grieving, we should keep in touch. Even to call a friend to say, please, can you get me milk from the grocery? It's very important. People shouldn't grieve in isolation or on their own. Sometimes it can be also difficult for some of our people in our African community to pour out the way they feel, maybe sometimes because of pride and things like that. But it is very, very necessary for people to reach out to friends, relatives who are grieving. So, yeah, I think the others have said it all, some of the tips about grieving.
All right. Thank you so much. Yes, like you said, sometimes when we are grieving, friends and families, they may not know what to say or what not to say. And then they end up staying quiet. They end up not saying anything. And then they keep postponing and postponing. Then it gets too long to the extent whereby relationships break up, friends drift apart. Yes, because you are my best friend. You were the closest person to me, but when I was grieving, you were not there. Even though when an individual is grieving, you still see those things. You still notice those who are there and those who are not there. So it's very necessary for friends and families to be there to support each other, especially during these difficult times of coronavirus. We have all the minutes on our phones to call. We have all the WhatsApp. We have Facebook. We have Zoom. We have so many platforms where we can connect with our loved ones to talk to. Unfortunately, we cannot have our ordinary wake keeps or and all the like. We all know how we like to enjoy
Yeah.
ourselves. We cook for England, and then
Yeah.
then we gather, we dance, we
Yeah.
rejoice, we
Thing.
celebrate the person's life. But now with coronavirus, we cannot do such things anymore. So what are those other things that we can do? We support them using the available means of communication at the moment. So we are going to move on to our next question. And I would like to start this particular question with Jay. Grieving is not just one feeling. It usually involves a range of different feelings, which over time can help individuals accept and understand. Therefore, are some of the stages of grief after the death of a loved one. And do they always flow in a linear pattern, as some people insinuate?
Thank you for asking this question. Stages of grief. There are, there are a lot of findings out there about the stages of grief. But when you look at all of the stages, I would like to summarize them to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stages. 5 stages of grief that I know of. I call it the DABDA. The stages are called DABDA. Why DABDA? It's just an acronym. The D stands for denial, the A stands for anger, and the B stands for bargaining. The D again stands for depression, and the last stage, which is A, is for acceptance. Now, not everyone will experience all of these 5 stages, and some people may not go through them in this particular order, all right? Because we have already seen that grief is different for every person. So you may begin coping with loss in the bargaining stage, and then find yourself in anger or denial, or you may remain for months in one of the 5 stages. but skip others entirely, right? Now let's go to the first stage. Stage one, which I call denial stage, is when you pretend, you're pretending that the loss or the change is not happening. You are denying that this has not happened.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow there's a good in it, because denying it gives you time to absorb the news and begin to process it more gradually, right? Um, it's a common defense mechanism, and it helps you to numb or put at ease, that the intensity of the situation. That stage, yes, denial stage. But as you move out of the denial stage, the emotions you've been hiding will begin to rise. Something begins to happen. You'll be confronted with a lot of sorrow you've denied. That's also part of the journey of grief, but it can be difficult. Examples of denial stage, right? Take the death of a loved one. We have one of our sisters here now who is grieving the death of a loved one. At this stage, one may say, well, this loved one is not gone. He or she will come around the corner at any second. That's denial. Take another example of a terminal illness diagnosis. Say you have been diagnosed with a terminal illness. What happens? This isn't happening to me. The results are wrong. That's denial. Right? You move from denial to the second stage, which is anger. So where denial may be considered as a coping mechanism, anger, on the other hand, is just a masking effect. So anger is hiding many of the emotions and pain that you carry, you see, and the anger may be, it may be redirected at other people, such as the person who died, or your ex, or your old boss, or you may even aim at, inanimate objects. Sometimes we get angry and destroy things. The anger may mask itself in feelings like bitterness or resentment. All right. And please note again that not everyone will experience this stage, and some may just linger here around. And as the anger, goes down or subsides, you may begin to think more rationally about what's happening, and you begin to feel the emotions you've been pushing aside. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's take an example of anger again. I have these two examples that we'll be looking at: the
Yeah.
death of a loved one and terminal illness diagnosis. These are the two that I'm just picking. Examples of anger stage: death of a loved one. If she cared for herself more, this wouldn't have happened. That's anger. Yeah. Terminal illness diagnosis. Where is God in this? How dare God let this happen? All right. We are at stage 2. We move on to stage 3, which is the bargaining stage. So during grief, you may feel vulnerable and helpless. In those moments, what happened? The moments of intense emotion, it's very uncommon to look for. You look for ways to regain control, or you want to feel like you can affect the outcome of an event. All right. So in the bargaining stage of grief, you may find yourself, you begin to create a lot of what if and if only. Those statements begin to come up. So it's also not uncommon for religious individuals, to try to make a deal or promise to God or a higher power in return for healing, or relief from the grief and pain. It's very not uncommon for that. So bargaining is one, is kind of, I would say, a line of defense against the emotions of grief. Okay, it helps you to postpone the sadness. It helps you to postpone the confusion. It helps you to postpone the hurt. That bargaining stage.
Yeah.
Again, we go to our examples: death of a loved one, terminal illness. The death of a loved one, in the bargaining stage, you say, if only I had called her that night, if only I had called him that night, she wouldn't be gone. You see? Or for terminal illness diagnosis, you say, if only we had gone to the doctor sooner, we could have stopped this from happening. You see? That takes us to stage 4, which is depression. So whereas anger and bargaining can feel very active, depression, on the other hand, may feel like a quiet stage of grief. You see? And in the early stages of loss, you may be running from emotions to emotions, and then trying to stay, a step ahead of all of those emotions that are disturbing you. You may begin to choose to isolate yourself from others to fully cope with the loss, right? I want to use this opportunity to commend our sister who is here on the talk show, grieving. But like you said, Clarice, that is strength, a sign of strength that she's here right now, right? So, it doesn't mean that that depression is easy or is well defined. Like other stages of grief, depression can be difficult and messy. It can feel very overwhelming. You may feel, someone put it this way, that you may feel foggy. You may feel foggy. You may feel heavy and confused. Right? Let's take our example again: death of a loved one. What am I without her? So life has just ended. This is I'm nothing. So that's a sign that you are going towards a direction which may not be appropriate for you. Right? Then in the case of a terminal illness diagnosis, my whole life comes to this terrible end. You see, you have just hit a wall, brick wall. That's something we can expand on. But let's consider the last stage, which is acceptance. So acceptance is not necessarily a happy or uplifting stage of grief. No, it doesn't mean you've moved past the grief or loss. No, it does, however, mean that you've accepted it and have come to understand what it means in your life now. You see, our sister again probably is in the stage of acceptance because she is here in the show talking with us. Right? So you may feel very, very different in this stage, and that's entirely expected. You see, you've had a major change in your life. Your aunt is gone, and it really it's a big thing. You see, now look to acceptance as a way to see that there may be more good days than bad days. But there may still be bad days, and that's okay. An example of acceptance stage: death of a loved one, where you say, I'm so fortunate to have had so many wonderful years with her, with him, and he or she will always be in my memories. That's acceptance. Terminal illness diagnosis: you say that I have the opportunity to tie things up and make sure that I get to do what I want in these final weeks and months. That's a sign of acceptance.
Yeah.
So please, I would like to give the floor to others so that I don't steal the show. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
You said it all, Jay.
You said it all.
It's a big lesson, massive lesson. Yeah.
Thank you for the lectures.
Yeah,
yeah, that was quite elaborate. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And acceptance, whatever stage you are, whoever is watching, you are in your grief process, aim at approaching the acceptance stage, aim at finding meaning in your grief. It's painful, it's painful. It's a very dark place to be in if you felt grief, if you felt the loss of a loved one before. You know exactly what I mean. Yes, I always say on all my talks, I always say, no matter how hard that situation is, no matter how painful it is, you have to look for that little thing. Because in that sadness, in that bitterness, in that anger, there's one little sweet thing inside.
That's right.
Yes. So we should aim to look at it. And as Jay said, acceptance doesn't mean that the grief has all gone away. It doesn't mean that everything has ended and that you are in a happy state. It simply means that you have accepted your new reality. This is me now, despite what has happened. Like our sister Eposi, she's here. So, and I'd like you to say something. These stages of grief are concerned. I won't want to ask what stage you are at because it's a bit tricky.
It is.
I know normal emotions that we go through. So over to you.
Well, this is the thing. I've been in the US now for more than 20 years. So I've not seen my family for that long. And when I lose people in my family, it does really hit me hard because I cannot be part of the dynamics. So it really hits me hard because it's almost like I'm alone. I'm going through the pain, the emotions, and everything alone. And the only way I get my strength is my connection to God. He is the only one that I sleep, I get my Bible, I talk to, and I say, please, God, give me my strength. Because at the end of the day, we don't know how we got here. We might look at the biological part and say, oh, somebody bet us. But guess what? For those of us who are believers, we know that there's a superpower, there's a supreme being that gave us the opportunity to be here. So when he wants somebody, we cannot stop that. We cannot stop that. We all are here for a reason. We don't even know why we are here. So for that reason, that's the only way that we can cope, by looking up to him and say, I think it was time for this person to exit. So that's the only strength I've been using to cope with what I'm going through. You know, like Jay already said, he already said all the steps. I studied sociology and anthropology. They say that human beings are very flexible, which means that people grieve differently. So it don't mean that because I'm sitting here, it means I'm not grieving. No, I am grieving, but I'm grieving in a way that I've used the various mechanisms that I can use to cope with my grieving. So he talked about the different stages, that they don't come aligned. And that's the truth about it, because we are human beings. We are very flexible. We feel what we feel, act the way we have to act. You know, so the one thing that I really want to hit on in all the stages is depression. That's what is more concerning to me. And a lot of times it depends on who died, because the person that dies has something to do with your connection. How are you connected to that person? What's the role that that person played in your life? That's when the emotions start coming on. So for me, what I'm going to say is that you need to, like a community, while we are offering self, we need to be a little more forceful, checking on the people, calling them and saying, I know I've told you I'm here, I'm a phone call away, but how are you today? How did you get up? How are you feeling? All of those things, propping in to get, you know, an understanding of the emotions that they're going through might help us to know when they need help. Because it comes to a point where people don't want to get out of the bed, they become depressed, they just like Tessy already talked about, people isolating themselves. That's how some people deal with grief. So we have to try to reach out and say, how are you feeling? How are you doing? Do you need me? Should I come over? And sometimes from their response, you can pretty much know that they need help. And I'm going to say for healthcare givers, a lot of times people feel like, oh, they know what to do. Oh, they are in the medical field, they understand. No. When you lose somebody, you shut down. You shut down to a point where you don't even think. So you need people to call you and come around and check on you. Unfortunately, because of COVID, people cannot do that. But like Clarice already said, that we have different media outlets. FaceTiming. You know, just use something that you can connect with them and know how they are feeling. And you might think, you know what, the way you look, it seems as though you've not had a shower for 2 days. You look like you're macheting. I'm going to want you to get help. And like I said, we have other shows coming up. So we're going to talk about all the help that we have in the community. There's lots of help, lots of support systems that we're going to talk about that another time.
Thank you so much for that. And to add to something which you said, how much, I would like to put it this way, how much we grieve depends on how much we loved. And I'll go back to love and grief go together. Because sometimes people are wondering, why does this person grieve their loved one so much?
To that extent.
To that extent. But you don't know how much love or how much connection those two people had. And as Eposi said, we also have to be mindful of that stage, that depression stage, especially during this period, because during this coronavirus period, most of us are already struggling with our mental health because of the coronavirus itself. And then when bereavement comes in again, it adds. So if we are going through grief, we have to be very careful and we seek the necessary help that's available out there. Festus, do you have anything to add to the stages of grief, the emotions that you go through?
Well, if there is anything to add, I will not go over what has already been elaborated and the session we've already had. But what I have to say is, as people, as especially Black people, we have to make sure that our mental health, emotional and psychological well-being is well taken care, because these things sometimes hit us differently. And sometimes we don't always have the support system that is usually there for people. And even when we have it, some of our cultures have made us in such a way we don't readily reach out. That is an issue that Now that you are sober, I would say, you should start making steps to make sure that you align yourself and ready in case, because this thing is going to happen. In life, I usually say it's either you are in trouble, heading to one, or you're just coming out of it. You're going to be in one of those areas. So grief
Mm-hmm.
is part of that journey that we're going to face. And I'm just going to say another thing to add on all of this is, if you find yourself on this, I would say, a spectrum of, say, the stages of grief. If you find yourself along this line, it is time where you have to now think that, just in case my own story is not going to be like the rest of the others, I could get to the stage of depression, and then I go down quickly into this pit of despondency that could drive me to even get to the worst stage of grief, which could be you doing something crazy. This is where we have to also make sure that we are there for people to prevent them from taking their own lives, because people grieve, and instead of following the stages like we have or we know, they could just, because it is not a linear process, it is not a progressive stage. People could break at any stage in time. So having that support system that will help them, it's very, very important. The bearers of bad news, those who go and then break this news that is bad or sad, we also have to be mindful how we tell this story, how we give this news out, and how we are going to also make sure that this person is well looked after and taken care of. Because you come and give this bad news, you don't know how this person is going to deal with it, and then you're gone. Make sure that you also be mindful of these things and help people. This is going to help a lot people grieving, especially during this pandemic.
Thank you so much, Festus. Thank you for that. And also to add, all these emotions that we go through during grief, they are necessary emotions which we have to go through. You cannot bury them. You have to follow them. And I think Jay mentioned that they don't necessarily follow a linear pattern. So we also have to be mindful of that, because even the bereaved, they would have gone through a process of grief before finally dying. They would have gone through the denial, the acceptance, bargaining, the depression, and then acceptance. Once they accept, that's when they are dying. And when they die, that's when our own grief now starts. So I would like to come over to Tessy. Tessy, if you have anything to add as far as that question is concerned, and then we will look at some of the questions from the audience. Over to you, Tessy.
Yes. Like the others have just said, they've said it all. The stages of grief can be different. People take it in different order.
Yeah.
Like Jay mentioned, the 5 stages. Yeah. Sometimes people are very shocked when they get a bad news. They are like, oh, I'm not sure if this is true. They are in denial.
Yeah.
They don't want to accept. I will quote an example. When I lost my dad, my mom was so depressed after the funeral, because he was the main breadwinner in the family, and he passed away. My mom was like a full-time housewife. You know, our African community back home, mothers are there to look after the children, cook, clean, do school runs, and the dad is the one who has to go to work and bring in money. My mom went through a very, very heavy depression for so many years because she couldn't believe that something like that will happen to us, very sudden, you know. So depression is one of the strong things that we need to take seriously when people are grieving, because it can lead to everlasting problems, mental health problems. Yeah. People tend to be depressed up to the stage where they can't even sleep. They cannot even eat. They can't even look after their health, like personal care. They can't shower. So the others have said it all. The stages of grieving depends on every individual. So we grieve differently. But in our community, we should learn to reach out to our fellow friends, relatives who are actually grieving, to give them
Yeah.
that support. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tessy, for that. Thank you. And it's very, as in as much as it is very necessary to reach out to our community, to reach out to friends and family. Sometimes people don't reach out because they may sometimes because some other individuals may not know what to say or what not to say when someone is grieving. So I'll prefer to protect my grief because I don't want to feel like I'm being judged or I'm being stigmatized. So those are maybe some of the reasons why people stay quiet. So before we continue to our next question, let's just acknowledge our guest speakers, our audience, and some of the questions they've asked. So we have Eka Ebu. She says, grieving alone gives me control over the way I feel. Okay. Then there's a question that comes in. If you do not have access to a phone, internet, or living an isolated life, how can you manage grief? Who would like to take this one up? There's a question.
If you
Yeah.
don't have access to a phone, internet, or
So during this pandemic, if somebody doesn't have access to these devices or to these connections, how can you manage your grief during this period? That's a question from the audience.
I would advise that if somebody cannot doesn't have access to phone or internet, sometimes we do advise people to write down the way they feel. You
Okay.
can write down what is ringing in your head, the way you feel. It's just like you are venting, you are talking to somebody.
Yeah.
Because I've done that myself. Sometimes when I write down things, the way I feel, how bad I feel, it helps you to go to bed and have a good sleep. So if there is anybody who hasn't got access to any of these devices like phone, internet, or they are living in isolation, they can just take a piece of paper and a pen and write down the way they feel about the situation that they are going through. It's like
Okay.
they are ventilating. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for that. There's another question, and I think it's directed to Jay. Jay, if you like to have the honors, can you see it on the screen?
Um, it's an it's quite
Okay. He says
it's
it's
an
an
honor
honor.
watching live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he says
This
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 is
is
for
this is for LJ. Say
yeah.
how could one get to do the things they like doing after they just lost someone? If you could use yourself as an example to explain the things you love doing and how you can apply them during your grieving moments. Okay. Thank you very much for raising that question. I enjoy listening to music. During the death of my mother, I had my headphone on and I was listening to those music, not just any kind of music, the music that soothes my soul, the music that makes me feel relaxed. Personally, I use music as a coping strategy when I'm sad or depressed or, bereaved. I identify my network, those friends who are not just fair weather friends, those friends who are not just there when things are going well with me, when I have abundance. I mean, those friends who are real friends, I identify them. And it's the same with everyone. You can filter those friends and then tap into those friends, have a phone call with them. You see, yeah, sometimes when you are grieving, it's very difficult to pick up the phone and ring someone. But before the grieving, what are the things? I ask myself, what are the things I enjoy doing? And one thing came to mind: music. I enjoy listening to music, sometimes even sleeping with music on. That's for me. For someone else, maybe it might be just cooking, or it might be just cleaning around, or going for a walk, or, doing whatever art, drawing, writing, like our sister said. You see, I just, if you look around before the sad event, what are those things that you enjoy doing? I think that's where I'm coming from.
Okay. That's brilliant. Thank you so much for that. Let me just take it off the screen. So he says again that grieving is not only about losing a loved one. There are many reasons or things that can cause us grief. Okay, thank you so much for that. But I would just like to point out that for this second episode, we are talking about grief as a result of the loss of a loved one during the COVID pandemic, or the loss of a loved one as a result of COVID. So our main topic, we are concentrating on grief as a result of death. So yes, and I know at the beginning, at the introduction, someone had actually mentioned that we also grieve maybe the loss of a job, or the loss of a huge financial amount of money, or maybe we grieve a divorce as well. But for the purpose of our discussion today, it's just about death as far as grief is concerned. So another question is, do men and women grieve differently,
Of
or
course.
for nothing to, or is it for it, does it have something to do with gender? Does it, Tessy, Tessy or Eposi can,
Yeah, I'm gonna say something about that.
Yeah.
Well, when
okay.
we talk about men and women grieving differently, it depends
Mm-hmm.
on the culture. It just
Yeah.
depends on the culture, because you have certain cultures that, in order to be macho, you have to keep all your feelings inside. It doesn't mean that they don't grieve, because guess what? When my father's mom died, he was in the bedroom just sobbing. But when he came outside, he put the face like he was okay. It's my mom that told us that, oh my God, your dad has been crying so much inside the bedroom, you know? So people think that men have that tough skin that they don't cry. Oh no, you have a lot of men that cry. So I'm not really going to say it is gender. It just depends on the individual. And it
Yeah.
depends on the relationship that you have with the person that you're grieving for. So when it comes to gender, that whole gender thing, like men, women, no, I'm against that. I feel like people express emotions the way they want to express their emotions. It don't
Mm-hmm.
matter what gender they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would just like to add, as we've said several times on the show, is that people grieve differently. It doesn't
Yes.
matter whether you are a man
Oh yeah.
or
Yes.
you are a woman. We all grieve. We all
Different.
grieve differently. And
Mhm. And sometimes people do express their feeling, or the way they grieve, depending on where they are, the community setup, their network, where they
mhm,
are. If you
okay.
look at it very closely, when we lost someone and we are over here in the Western world, we cannot cry the way we cry when we are back home. So when we are back home, we react to we grieve differently. But when we are here in the Western world, we grieve differently. And like Clarice have just said, it doesn't matter how you grieve. People grieve differently. So there is no difference between, we cannot say men will grieve this way and women grieve this way. So it depends on every individual how they grieve and how connected you are with the person who has just passed away.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. Now let's get back into, let's put our focus back on coronavirus and bereavement and grief. Why might grief be harder during this period? I'll start with you, Jay. Why is it that grief is really difficult during this coronavirus pandemic?
I think of two important elements. First of all, there's the human element. Um, that lack of face-to-face contact with loved ones to share your loss or to be with you during this trying moment is a factor that really makes it harder to go through the process, you see. So the first thing is the lack of the human element. Nowadays, everything is done virtually.
Mhm.
So, funeral services are done virtually, and doing a ceremony, which used to be done um, with the presence of everyone, doing it nowadays remotely makes it even hard to go through the process because you feel a bit, alone. Our sister is just saying that, look, she's there, is in the States, and everyone is out there. The aunt and the late aunt and the family members are there, so she feels like she's alone. So that physical element, the human element, is missing, right?
Yeah.
And therefore, it takes me to the second point, which is the lack of a proper farewell ceremony.
Yes.
You see, so grief might be harder during coronavirus because we miss to properly say farewell in a ceremony which is associated to having a loved one being sent to the other side. So I think these two elements are important to me. The human element and also that lack of, oh my goodness, I would have loved to really carry out a farewell ceremony, a wake keeping, a burial ceremony. All of those, when they are missing, they make you feel a bit, lonely, and therefore maybe even extend your grieving.
Yeah. That's definitely true. And we all know that during those moments when our loved one is still ill and it's in the hospital, so sometimes we treasure those last moments, the final hours to spend with that person, to take care of that person. And when that doesn't happen, yeah, and the person dies, you may end up grieving in guilt or with
Yeah.
guilt. So, Festus, do you want to add something to why might grief be harder during the coronavirus period?
Well, I think it's just the same thing like I just said, because right
Mm.
now it has to do with the non-accessibility of you, like having this one-to-one contact with people or even a group of people, and
Mm.
especially in the UK when we have these rules and protocols and lockdown, it it makes it even harder for you
Yeah.
to go through
Mm.
this process, and that is why, like I was saying, one of the questions that was posed about you not having access to the internet or not having contact or whatever. And then I think the person mentioned living an isolated life. I would say try your best as possible not to live a life of isolation. Because, like we know the saying, no person is an island unto itself.
No.
Because of man is created to be a social being, a
Yeah.
Yeah.
social creature.
Exactly.
And if this
Exactly.
is missing, and then you get hit with grief, my heart is heavy
Yeah.
to say, not to be a prophet of doom, but the grief would be in a different magnitude and size and intensity than
Yeah.
if you had some people around, even if to drop by the door and stand from afar and say hello and talk with you and be there, it's going to be different. The grieving is different when there are people around. You might not have this close contact with them, but now with the pandemic, it's even harder because even though you might have some people, you might just want to hang out with them. You might want to go out, maybe on a trip, go to a restaurant or go somewhere, but there is nowhere open. Everything is closed. Everything is like in a lockdown, and it makes it even harder for people to even
Yeah.
come around, see you, to visit. So that makes it's a whole different ball game, and the dynamics are different as well, and that causes a lot of
A lot of
issues for
stress.
people.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's true.
Thank you
And
so much.
sometimes it gets even worse when, after losing a loved one, you are not
Mhm.
even able to see the loved one
Yes.
Right.
before
Yeah.
burial.
Right.
That
Mm.
makes
Yes.
it even hard
Yeah.
because
Mm-hmm.
of coronavirus.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
With all the
Mm-hmm.
restrictions
With
and
all the restrictions,
yeah.
you lose a loved one and you are just, all right, now he or she is gone. Okay, I'll be able to go there and say my final farewell. Sometimes you don't even have that opportunity for a final farewell. So it
Yeah.
makes it even harder during the
Yeah.
coronavirus.
So
That's
hard.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Tessie, over to you. Do you have anything to add?
Like what Festus and Jay, yeah, it's so difficult during this period. Very, very difficult. So many people are grieving in isolation, and
Yeah.
a lot of people are in fear, with the present situation, the lockdown, you know, it's so difficult, so difficult grieving
Yeah.
during this period.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And Eposi, and anything to add?
Well, I mean, they've said it all. All I'm going to say is that we need to try to empower one another, especially spiritually, because we are physical beings, but we are connected to a spiritual being that brought us here on earth. So whether you're grieving alone or you're grieving with a community, you have to have your personal relationship with God that's going to help you to know how to navigate through these emotions and feelings so you can pretty much be grounded. So you can have closure within you to understand that we did not come here by our own making. Somebody brought us here, and he has a reason why we are here, and he has a timetable for each of our lives. And when that time is here, the time is up, you got to go. So
Thank you.
those who are grieving need to connect with that spiritual touch so they can pretty much understand what the
Yeah.
human existence is all about.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And unfortunately, sometimes when you are grieving, it's that supreme being that we get to blame. It's the same supreme being that we get to question, and we get to ask him, why would you allow this
This to
happen?
happen.
When
Yeah.
you are a loving and a caring God,
Exactly.
why would you allow me suffer this much?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Exactly.
very necessary that we create that connection with him during this period. But at the same time, sometimes he is the last person we want to hear about. So thank you so much, Eposi,
Just a
for
point
giving us.
before you proceed,
Close.
Clarice.
Okay,
Just a point. I have seen in the chat box that from our brother Stanley that grieving begins with acceptance,
acceptance. Okay,
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So in the early part of this conversation, I mentioned that although we have all of these stages of grieving,
mm-hmm.
it does not mean that they appear. We go through the processes as they are
It's
listed.
yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So to our brother Stanley, grieving begins with acceptance.
Yeah,
Maybe to another person, grieving begins with another part of
Denial.
this. Yeah, denial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's worth noting that. Thank
Yeah.
you.
thank you so
Mhm,
much for,
Thank
thank you
you.
so much
mhm,
for that.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we continue to our next question before we go back to our comments. And I really want to acknowledge everyone watching and for taking your time to watch and to contribute on our show today. And if you haven't shared, please share. We all need this support during this period, because even if you are not grieving because of bereavement, it's been difficult during this period of
Period. Yeah.
coronavirus. Yeah, because even the presence of coronavirus actually made us to go through grief as well,
Yeah.
because
We
coronavirus
see
took us by surprise. It shocked us. We were frustrated, we panicked, we know all the panic buying that we did, and we some of us are still in denial, because there are still many people out there who still say coronavirus doesn't exist. There are
yeah.
so many of us out there who are still questioning God, why he allowed coronavirus to come the way it did. There are still many of us who have not yet accepted that coronavirus is there, and there are still so many of us who are struggling with depression or mental health issue as a result of
Mm.
isolation, stay at home, and things like that.
Yeah.
Especially those who have had pre-existing conditions, or those with disabilities, etc., etc. So
Yeah.
we continue. What would you tell someone who is grieving, especially during this period? Let's keep our our conversation around coronavirus, around the, when I say this period, I mean coronavirus.
Coronavirus.
Yeah. This is over to you. What would you say to someone who is grieving during this difficult time?
Well, like everything and most things in life, I think I will start off by telling them that one, first of all, I won't tell you not to do. I won't tell you not to cry. I
Mhm.
won't do that, because that. Well, I mean, one of the things I learned is as you get older and there are certain things that are just what it is. If you've lost someone, you have to mourn that person. If it means anything to you, you have to grieve. You have to accept it, and then I have to just let them know that, these two shall pass. COVID-19, the season that you're going through is going to pass someday. But
Yeah.
before that happens, you have to go through this phase, because we know time heals. The intensity of and the shock that you get from the announcement of you losing somebody today might not be the same in 2 months' time. So with
Yeah.
time, the intensity also drops, because time heals. And it is an important thing because for most humans, like some of us, we know it's not like we don't know that there is light at the end of the tunnel. For most part of life, we know there is light at the end of the tunnel. The problem we now have is living life in the tunnel. That is the dark part. How do we navigate through this grieving moment? That is what most people tend to deal with, and that is where people either go through that process or some just throw in the towel, which is what we need to be mindful that at this moment in time, we need to be that supporting system because people have gone through grief and have actually come out on the other side by having a good, healthy supporting system and also having some healthy lifestyles. So it's some of these things that we need to incorporate, try to support them and try to be there and tell them and encourage them to know that even though they are feeling the pain they are feeling today, they will get through this pain. They will get through this grief. They will come out on the other side. And if they need a friend, we are here to provide that friend. We have the support system. We call on them and to know that they are not going through it on their own. They are not, because what you do when you go through grief, it's everything plays in the mind. Less is spoken, more plays in the mind, especially when it's nighttime when everybody's sleeping. You are
Yes.
wide awake. Those are the moments where even if you're driving, you stop at the green light and then you drive through the red light because
Yes.
your mind is not
It's
just there.
not.
And that is when we need to let people know, give them hope and that support, and not just say it verbally. Like I know people who go around telling people who are grieving and say, well, I'll pray for you. And that's the prayer already. They don't really do it after that. That's it. They've just told you. We need to go beyond the words. We need to actually show that we care and that we are really that support system. We are the last bastion, so to say, or a bulwark to support them if they want to fall. We are there to catch them and to let them know that we together can navigate through life as a team.
Thank you so much, Festus. Thank you for that. Jay, over to you. What would you say? What would you tell someone who is grieving during this period?
First, I would just say, please allow yourself to navigate through the stages of grief. That's it. Allow yourself to go through those stages. The stages might be, from different order. Allow yourself to go through those stages. And remember that you were once down. When you were down, how did you get up? How did you get up? Right? Maybe this is the most tragic event that has happened in your life, but there is something within you that when you dig deep, you'll find that there is some strength inside. You can tap into that. Brother Festus has said it. There are hands out there stretching forth to you. You ought to reach out also because there's a helping hand out there. You see, take your time and reach out to those you think or believe are there to support you. Don't stay in your closet.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Thank you for that. And Eposi, over to you.
As a result of coronavirus, what I'm going to let them know is that, they have to know that there are resources out there. Because what we forget to know is that some people have lost their parents. And can you imagine kids having to start worrying about their next meal, their well being, who is going to take them over? So, we have to think that it's not only older people who are dying whose kids are already grown. No, you have younger kids that their parents are also dying of corona and they don't know what their next chapter is going to look like. So my thing is about the resources that are out there. There is a lot of resources out there that hopefully our next show, we're going to go into those resources in the various communities that we are, where people can know how to go about their next chapter. And I've already talked about the whole idea of Christianity, spirituality. That's something, maybe that's the time to evangelize somebody, tell somebody about the goodness of them knowing that there's a supreme being who is there for them. So to me, that's the most I'm going to tell anybody who is going through death as a result of coronavirus, like their families, look for those resources and know that there's lots of people out there who are willing to help if you just let them know what you're going through.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Over to you, Tessy. Over to you, Tessy. Think um think her network has frozen.
I
Okay.
think
I
so
guess.
too.
Yeah. So we continue. I think that there was a question which someone asked, what role does the African culture play in grieving? This mm.
Okay, can I take that?
Yeah, please, you can.
Okay, the African culture, we have a thing of not sharing our emotions, especially when it comes to tapping into resources. Because guess what? We live in a culture where, especially I'm talking about abroad, we have that feeling of giving that impression that we are okay, even when we are not, especially when it comes to financial, and that hinders us from going into the ability of gaining from one another. Because here is the thing, if you're going through maybe grief as a result of coronavirus, and maybe you're displaced because maybe your mom died or your father or the breadwinner died, it's a place to reach out to people in the community and say, I need help. Can we do a GoFundMe? But our culture hinders us from doing that because, especially here in the United States, people feel like, oh, GoFundMe is because you didn't plan your life. I mean, who says that death tells you I'm on my way? No, it just happens when it happens. So sometimes it can happen when you least expect it, because with corona, people don't expect it. It's not like you get sick for a long time and then boom, you're dead, where you start making plans. This takes you by storm. So please, our culture, we have to break those barriers. We have to know that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to say, I need help. It's okay to even ask somebody, can you assist me? That's what I'm going to add to that.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you so much. Um
I'm sorry, I don't know what happened to my network.
okay, we were just discussing the question, what role does the African culture play in grieving? Jay, do you have something to say as far as that's concerned?
I think we that's a broad question. I think
Yeah.
yes, it's just like asking what role does the European culture play in grieving? You see,
Making
so
grief.
Africa is quite, yes, Africa is quite a huge continent, you see,
Mhm.
and with different cultures, right?
Yeah.
So I think it plays an important role. So those roles, when we look at um, happiness, when there's a happy event in the society, what role does the African culture play in that? A lot. And in the same way, in grieving, our culture, depending from which part of Africa we are, this plays a very important role.
Okay. Thank you so much. Um Tessie, do you have something to add or
Yes.
Festus?
What role does the African culture play in grieving? Yes, it depends from where you are coming from, because every culture is different, and Africa is so massive. It's a big continent. So people do grieve differently. So, and yeah, it depends from different culture to culture. So
Yeah.
not every culture, no culture is the same.
Yeah, that's perfectly right. No culture is the same, but I would like to say, we all know. I think most of us here are from Cameroon, and death or bereavement or grief. These are some of the topics which people do not normally just decide to talk about it unless something has happened. I mean, even to the extent whereby when you've lost
When you've lost.
a loved one, even those who come to you to visit you, they end up not actually discussing the person who has died. They end up not actually talking about the main reason why they are there. So I think our African culture, in a way, has a role to play, and that role is muting, is helping people to shut down their grief, is making people not to be able or not to feel free to speak up or to speak out, knowing that there will be someone to listen to them. And like Jay said, this is a very broad topic which can be discussed at another time.
Right,
So yeah, I
right.
just want to use
But
this
can I add something
opportunity.
on that? Because, I don't want us to always look at the negative side. I want to add something from the positive side.
Exactly. Yeah.
African culture is very rich.
Hmm.
Despite the fact that I talked about, people being like we hide our feelings because we don't want to be laughed at. Also, Africans are very communal in our behavior. We support one another. Here
Yeah.
in the US, when it comes to grieving, even at this time of Corona,
Mm-hmm.
families still take the risk of going to the bereaved just to go see
Yeah.
them and talk to them. Meanwhile, some cultures are so guarded that they are like, oh no, there's no way, I don't want to get myself infected. But
Mm-hmm.
Africans are still taking that chance. For example, we did lose my best friend, one of my best friends, earlier
Yeah.
on when Corona just started, but she did not die of Corona. So there was this fear. The media frenzy was so bad, but a lot of Africans still showed up during the funeral.
Yeah.
So we have that support system that despite all odds, we're still going to take a risk of being there. And
Yeah.
even the fact that, it comes to nutrition, Africans will always find out if you have food in your home. They're going to cook, even if they have to come and drop it at your doorsteps, they'll do that. They'll
Okay.
come and say, I can't come in, but this is food. I want to make sure that you have food in the house. I want to make sure that the kids have somewhere to go. They'll, even during this Corona period, they're still going to take your kids out and say, let me take them out for McDonald's and I'll drop them back. Just give them their mask. So our
Yeah.
culture is very rich. And despite the limitations, we still have a lot of good things that we do as a culture to support one another during the grieving period, especially now that is a corona period.
Yes.
That's right. Yes,
And
the
thank you so
African
much.
culture. Thank you very much for. Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt you. The African culture is a we mentality culture. Meanwhile, I think the maybe European or Western, if you like, culture is an I mentality, and therefore this we mentality culture plays a very big role in bereavement.
Thank you so much. And
Exactly,
uh,
exactly.
talking about the support, that will be our next topic for our next episode on
Okay.
this, for this webinar: support, mental health, well-being, and things like that. So I just want to use this opportunity to acknowledge everyone who is watching. Someone just commented that that is ignorant. They should use the CDC guidelines on gatherings. Okay, thank you very much for that. um, we want to thank Jane from Zambia, um, Gianna Asa, yeah, and everyone that's watching. We appreciate you, and we hope you've learned something from this broadcast today. We are just heading towards the end of our session. We've been live for 1 hour, 22 minutes, watching both on Facebook and on YouTube as well. And we have been talking on coping with grief as a result of the bereavement of our loved one during this coronavirus, because of coronavirus. So, any final words from each and every one of you, and then we will end our session. Then we have time to prepare for our next episode next Saturday. So I'll start with you, Festus. A final word for today.
Right. Final words. I would say grief, bereavement, pain, loss of loved one, all of those stuff, they have no boundary. They know no color, no age, no gender, no ethnicity, or wherever you come from. They really don't care. They come to all and sundry, and it will meet you any day unannounced. And so, if we have, what we should be doing is, I believe, is to have I could just refer it to a successful or something called a pain management system, because if you can have it while you don't yet have it, when the things happen, you can then cope with it successfully. So while you are quote unquote sober, you should think about some of these things, because it will come. It's just a matter of when. It's not a matter of if. So we should also not be naive about it. So we should live life not being too cautious about it, but should know that if it happens, what am I going to do? Because your response is what will make you. It will either make you or break you. So you need to start having this supporting system. Choose the people you hang out with, your friends, those around you, to be those people that are most going to be influential and helpful when things like this happen. So, and also remember, you're not alone. There are supporting systems out there. There are coping. There are strategies out there. There are steps that you can follow. There are people to contact when this happens. So we should not be naive about it, and we should be open to talk about it, because some of these issues will kill you if you don't talk about it.
Thank you so much. And over to you, Jay. Your final word for today.
Thank you very much. Thank you. The key to understanding grief is realizing that no one experience sees the same thing. Grief is very personal. You may feel something different every time. You know, you may need several weeks, several months, or even years to overcome this. If you decide that you need help coping with the feelings and changes, a mental health professional may be a good resource for checking your feelings, or maybe a coach. You have never considered one. This might be an opportunity for you to consider a resilience coach who will help you tap into your energy so that you can focus on your strength and the things that will make you happy. Because, as I say, where focus goes, energy flows. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Yes, where focus goes, energy flows. Thanks a lot for that. Tessy, over to you. Your final word for today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Clarice. I would like to say we live in a very high uncertain time, and we are surrounded by fear and anxiety, especially now with coronavirus. And I will say people should be gentle with themselves when they are grieving, although it's not easy sometimes because because grieving can be very exhausting. And also, we've got a lot of services out there where people can go for support. We shouldn't stop advising people to use those services. And in our next show, or towards the end of our show, we'll be talking about those services that are there. There are lots of support system out there where people can ask for support, because it's not easy when you are grieving. And it doesn't matter how people feel when they grieve. It is normal how they feel. It's not something that is not usual. It is very, very normal. But people should be able to try their best to ask for support, for help. That's my contribution.
Thank you so much for that. And over to you, Eposi, for your final word for today.
Well, I'm going to say knowledge is power. So, like somebody who has a platform, I'm going to tell everybody that they should share this particular segment and they should tell other people about the coming shows, because as a community, we do need knowledge in order for us to live in a very comfortable manner. And when I saw Therese having this foundation of rainbow care, I realized that it speaks a lot with what we're going through right now. Because, like they always say, that there's always a silver lining in every cloud. So, of course, there must be a silver lining in this cloud. And I'm hoping that we're going to be alive to see what that silver lining is. Because I always say that God does things for a reason. He might want to pass a message. He might want to teach us something. So eventually, we all are going to see what the silver lining is in this particular storm. So I want to beg my people to know that when we talk about Africans having this communal way of supporting the grief, somebody talked about ignorance. No, I wasn't saying that people are just going to walk into a family member's house without following the protocol. I made a show that I talked about us knowing that coronavirus is real and we should follow the CDC guidelines, which is trying to stay 6 feet away from one another, wearing a mask, wash our hands. So despite the fact that we have that communal way of supporting one another, it doesn't stop us from following the guidelines. So all I want to say is that I want to thank this particular forum that we came to pass knowledge to our community, and I hope people are going to benefit something from this.
Thank you so much, Tessy, Eposi, sorry. And I just want to thank each and every one of you for offering your time, your services to speak here today. I just want to thank Tessy, Eposi, Jay, Festus for being guest speakers today, and the knowledge you've shared out there is very, very important.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, and also our next episode, we are still going to have some of you here on there, and we are still looking forward to gain more knowledge as far as this topic is concerned, as far as this conversation is concerned. So I'll say bye bye to each and every one of you here. Then I'll end the show in a minute. But don't go off. You wait for me in the waiting room. Thank
Thank
All
you.
you.
right then. All
Okay.
right then. All right then.
Yeah.
It's sad.
Okay. So I'm just taking you out. Then I'll end the show in a minute. So just wait for me. So thank you so much, everyone, for watching. So we are looking forward to our next episode, which is our third episode on the, I think, the 20th of February. I'm so excited today because this is one of those topics that I'm so passionate about. Well, maybe because I have a personal experience as far as grief and bereavement are concerned. And I usually say, let's give it a voice. Let's give a voice to those topics which most individuals deem too emotional, too sensitive, where they say they are very taboo topics where you don't really have to talk about them, or you tiptoe around these topics, or some expect you to put everything under the carpet or under your pillow and never talk about them. But this is an opportunity for each and every one of us to be able to speak up, to speak out, knowing that there are people out there who will hear you, and again, they will not judge or they will not stigmatize you. So to end our show today, I just have this little quote to send out to anyone who is grieving the loss of a loved one. I would just like to say, walk on with hope in your heart, and you will never walk alone. So stay tuned, stay blessed. Love you always. Enjoy your weekend and see you next Saturday. Bye bye for now. Take care. It's been AC, your host.